Aloha and welcome to Kupunaho, that is New Kupuna, a wordplay on Kapunaho. I'm Chris Yano, your host, and this is a talk story podcast by, for, and about us, the Punahou class of 69. It's a privilege to reach this age and realize, hey, we are the kupuna now. What kinds of responsibilities do we take on in this position, and what kind of legacy might we as kupunaho offer? Our guest today is Susan Au Doyle, a quiet intellectual powerhouse during her time at Punahou and a community leader in the years since. She started off her post-Punahou life as a music major at Brown University, and she has grown and shaped her adult life through its many twists and turns since then. Her CV gives the official tale of her career: first female, first local, first person of color hired as president of Oahu's Aloha United Way, president and CEO of YWCA of Oʻahu. And we bow down to that public presence, but also I'm curious about the private experiences. Welcome, Sue.
Thanks very much, Chris.
You know, Sue, the first thing that comes to mind when I read this kind of litany of accomplishments, and you're so modest and nice and kind, it is not as if you would tout that. But I just want to know, what does it mean to you to be a kind of first in something that you've done, to be maybe a path breaker? What does that kind of leadership mean to you?
You know, I never set out to be the first of anything. Actually, I never set out to be the leader or the acknowledged leader of anything, the president of anything. Those kinds of opportunities just sort of came my way. And once given that opportunity, I think I felt like, well, I should really try to do the best I can with the opportunity and make as much hay as I could during my time doing those things. And I also realized that when you step into those roles, you're not stepping into it just for yourself. You're stepping into it for any younger people, for instance, who may come into those roles later. And you need to set a good example. So I think it was meaningful to me in that way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But growing up, who were your examples?
You know, I think it was really my mom primarily, but also my family, the rest of my family. I have an aunt who was one of my mother's older sisters, and she was the second licensed social worker on the island of Maui, and for many years was second in command of everything from child protective services to social service, because in those days everything was under one department. And she never wanted to take the lead role. She wanted to stay second, and I always looked up to her to the extent that I understood what she was doing as a real role model. But my father was a butcher. My mother didn't work for many years, and then through various circumstances became a police dispatcher. So I think, you know, you do what you can, or you do what you have to do to keep your family intact and strong. And I think I had a lot of examples of that in my close-knit family.
Yeah. It's interesting to think about leadership and what goes into the making of that, you know, and who wears that mantle, how you wear it, when is it thrust upon you. But I agree, sometimes you don't necessarily strive for it. And maybe the people who just really, really want to be leaders, maybe those are the very ones who shouldn't, right? Sometimes for all the wrong reasons. Now, I was listening to various interviews that you've already done. And, you know, you're such a public figure, Sue. You've done many interviews. But one of them, I think it was with Leslie Wilcox, talked about, it was one in which you talked about your experiences with polio as a child. I wonder if you could just say something about that. And I understand that the polio is beginning to recur, as it often does in later years. How has that been or become a part of you?
Well, you know, if you've ever had any kind of injury, disability, at whatever level, I think you're reminded of it almost constantly. So sometimes if I'm not feeling really strong, every step will remind me that I have a weak left leg, for instance. it's one of those things that I think if you can save anybody from that experience, it's a good thing to do, because it's just one less thing to have to think about and one less thing to be self-centered about, if you will. So when I had that interview, it was actually with Catherine Cruz, and I had that interview with her because I had heard on the radio that our vaccination rate in Hawaii for just all school vaccinations, but in particular polio, had dropped. And I was just astounded because the Rotary Club in particular has been a leader worldwide to exterminate polio, which is just debilitating in other parts of the world. And we had gotten down to a handful of cases. So to hear that people were taking for granted that polio would not recur was just amazing to me, and I felt compelled to say something about its impact not only on myself, but on my whole family. I mean, it was so traumatic for my mother that she found me, like almost being able to walk, and then one day I couldn't sit up. That it took her 35 years. I asked her numerous times, tell me what happened. Tell me that story.
How old were you at the time, Sue?
When I contracted polio, I was 1.
You were 1.
I was 1. And my mom was a young mother. I was the third child of 4. And it took her 35 years before she could bring herself to talk to me about it. But I remember many mornings getting up. She would take me, when I was really tiny, she would take me to a friend's beachfront place and walk me up and down the wet sand to strengthen my legs. And she would massage my legs and my feet. And I couldn't wear regular shoes. Couldn't go barefoot, and I had to wear these ugly brown shoes, which I just hated because it made me different. It made me feel, in my own mind, it made me stand out. I got regular shoes when I think I was in 4th grade, and it's just one of those things that I think helped me to maybe understand that it's important to be inclusive of other people and realize that the things that you see on the surface are not necessarily what they're going through or who they are.
I mean, that's such an amazing story to me. And one thing that stands out about that story is the notion of feeling or being different, and what that means in terms of how you develop a self out of that. For those, and we all have our differences, of course, but for those who feel their differences might be, I don't know, either insufferable or the cause of ridicule, what would you say? What kind of advice can you give to people like that? What to do with difference?
I think the most you can do is just be yourself and to surround yourself, I think, with people who are inclusive and understanding. I don't know that I would say change your mind. Sometimes people say, get over it. I would never give somebody that kind of advice because I don't think it's the kind of thing that anybody from the outside has the right to say to somebody else who knows themselves and going through trying to develop their own self-confidence and self-reliance. So I just think do what you can to overcome whatever issues you can, but surround yourself with people who support you and love you and be yourself.
It sounds like a balance, right? That you start with a basis of a kind of emotional stability, people that love you. Perhaps in your case, maybe your mother was the chief lover of you and contributed to your, quote, healing. At the same time, accepting your difference or making it manageable in some way. I will say that, seeing you at Pono, I never knew that you had polio as a young child. And I'm not sure how many now Pono classmates do. But, what to do with that is my question. Now, Sue, I understand you spent summers and other childhood chunks of time in Paia, Maui. And you describe your times there playing with cousins and siblings as, quote, incredibly idyllic. And I was just wondering, can you describe some of the idyllic times and what those idyllic times have meant for you as an adult?
Chris, I was really fortunate when I was young to fly up from Honolulu to Maui to visit my grandmother and my aunt They lived in the first house on the road through Paia toward Hana. So if you know that little stretch, there's a 2-story house on the beach side that's used to be green with a white trim. That's an old plantation style house. And it was on the beach, separated from the beach just by a narrow strip of those ironwood. We used to call it the forest, the ironwood forest, and we have pine cone fights in the forest and all of that on our way to the beach. And we were from the city, of course, and our cousins were the same ages as we were, and they were from the country, what we considered Maui country. And it was a very idyllic time. We'd go up there, we'd have little adult supervision. We could play all we wanted, swim, and it was just a wonderful foundation for us to be creative in our own play and to really get to know each other and to support each other, really. We did that for a number of years. And I think what it's meant to my adult life is that I know what it feels like to be in a team like that, to be a group of people that are enjoying each other and create. For us, it was, as youngsters, we were creating a good time. As adults, we can create a good time around a product or an improvement in community or whatever we're working on. And I think that's what it's meant to me in my adult life.
It sounds, too, that one of the lessons of this idyllic time on Maui is that creativity, something called creativity, has to occur with a huge bubble of free time, with a kind of freedom. In other words, you can't say, you must be creative now, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes to be creative. It's throwing away the clock.
Mm-hmm. I think that's something that we, in today's age, don't give our kids enough time to do. I mean, we're very focused on making sure that they tick off certain things because they're on their way to college or whatever. But they do need time and space to be their own people and to develop that creativity. You hear about writers who say you got to just get up in the morning and grind away at it. And that may be true in some ways, but having also played instruments and tried to arrange things and done some musical stuff, it's very hard to be creative on demand. So I agree with what you're saying.
Now, other aspects of Sue, which I think are really, really interesting. And one is the place of art and music in your life, that you were a music major at Brown University, that you still do play music. Can you just tell us something about that side of Sue that contributes to who you are?
Well, recently I decided that I needed to take up piano again. I've had a grand piano sitting in my living room for probably 20 years. And for most of that time, I didn't play it. I had taken piano lessons 60 years ago, I think, when I was first at Punahou, and then kind of set it aside, except for Christmas when I struggled through a few carols. But I decided to take it up again, and it's been a wonderful experience, not only getting my fingers to move, but also getting my brain, I think, to accept something new and different again. I started formal music at Punahou in the orchestra, played violin through high school and college. And I actually then planned to get into art when I was at Brown. But I was put into the physics department first, so I struggled through that for a couple of years and decided I was spending a lot more time in music and enjoying that a lot more, so I decided to get a music degree. And then I started working when I came back here, and I really didn't do a lot in music for about 40 years. But it has been an incredible source of enjoyment, grounding, calm. It's really helped me get through some tough times, and I really feel at peace when I play music, especially music with other people. So I now have a group of women that I get together with on Sunday afternoons, this sacred time between 2 and 4 when we sing vintage Hawaiian music together. And I'm hopeful of learning some slack key guitar.
I'm sure you'll do it. And you know, it just is interesting to think of the connections between science and music, and Leonardo da Vinci, you know, a scientist, and and just the ways in which these kinds of measures of beauty interconnect, whether it's in the physical world or the oral world, the musical world, etc. Last question, which I ask everybody: now that we are all becoming kupuna of sorts, what would you like to teach or pass down to others? And in other words, what does being a kupuna mean to you?
You know, I think I thought a lot about this question because I've had the benefit of listening in on your interviews of other people. And, you know, I think it's really kind of a way of being. It's trying to help model for the next generation what it means to be a good citizen, what contributing to society means, how you can think about your own qualities, skills, attributes, and how they fit into the fabric of the community. I've tried over the years, as I've learned more about myself and about how the community works, or we'd like it to work, I've tried myself to help mentor and give opportunities to younger women in particular. I was given a lot of opportunities by mostly men, because they're mostly male leaders in the generation before. And I think it really helped me then to plug myself into the community and do some of the things I've had the opportunity to do. So I think it's not just saying, okay, this is what I've learned, but also saying this is how I hope that we can teach the next generation to be, because it's only through participating in the community and working with others to create a better community that we will get that product. So that's what I think I'd like to pass on.
I mean, I think that's wonderful, and thank you. And what I find so valuable about that is the emphasis on community. In some ways, the de-emphasis upon yourself, but then the reinsertion of yourself in terms of how can we keep community, how can we better community, how can we always be working together. So with that, I just want to thank you, Sue, for joining us. It's been such a pleasure and so many lessons to be learned. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chris.
Mahalo for listening. This has been Ku Punahou, a talk story podcast by, for, and about us, the Punahou class of 69. I'm your host, Cristiano, with production help from Carlene Tani and Sue Au Doyle. I hope that listening to these interviews might prompt each of us to reflect on those pivotal experiences and insights that make up our own lives, and to share them with families and friends. This is our responsibility, our ongoing legacy. So until next time, ahui o.